When I first got onto TikTok and started using it, I'd resisted it like every sensible adult should resist it. It's just a place where teenagers do trending silly dances, isn't it? And eventually I was convinced to get on there and to use it. And actually it's not just a place where teenagers do trending dances. There's all kinds of information and bits and pieces and weirdness that's on there. And I was kind of sucked in. I was like, damn, this feels like, you know, the internet in 2010. This is like the internet, this is like YouTube in 2010. It was weird, it was wonderful, it was extreme, it was niche. There was all kinds of stories and things and everything was happening. And so for about, I think 2 months, 3 months, I was like, this is a great platform. I really, really enjoy this. And then I read a book. I read a book and it destroyed my love of TikTok. And I can't enjoy TikTok now because of this book. The book is The Brothers Karamazov by Fyodor Dostoevsky. Why does The Brothers Karamazov destroy the pleasure that can be found in TikTok? Well, it does it in a number of ways. I'd like to read you a quote to begin with from The Brothers Karamazov. The man who lies to himself and listens to his own lie comes to such a pass that he cannot distinguish the truth within him or around him, and so loses all respect for himself and for others. And having no respect, he ceases to love. And in order to occupy and distract himself without love, he gives way to passions and coarse pleasures and sinks to bestiality in his vices, all from continual lying to other men and to himself. The moment that we're living through right now, at this particular point in human history, we really need to consider the ways in which we relate to truth and the ways in which our relationship with truth itself may have become irredeemably damaged. We may have actually entrained ourselves, not everyone, but we broadly as a species, to be allergic to truth, especially if the truth doesn't align with a pre-existing narrative or a pre-existing worldview. What has that got to do with TikTok? One of the themes that comes back again and again in The Brothers Karamazov, simplicity, and is a theme of simply and honestly and openly telling the truth. There is a point in the book where the two brothers sit, Alyosha and Ivan sit. One says to the other, let us talk like idiots. Let us talk like idiots. Let's be fools. Let's be open, let's be frank, let's be honest, and let's be earnest. And this theme is returned to again and again in The Brothers Karamazov. What happens with social media? What happens with platforms like TikTok? You can't really be simple and earnest on a platform like TikTok and expect to do well. It only rewards insincere, reaction-seeking, grandstanding type behavior. It's not interested in sincerity and truth. It doesn't reward simplicity. It wouldn't reward you for simply and openly stating what you understand to be true. In such an environment where we're being rewarded for being too clever, for being a little too tempted to show off about how smart we are and what we know and who we represent, truth suffers, sincerity suffers. At a point in the novel where one of the main characters, Mitya, is accused of murdering his own father, and it's the night before the trial, and his younger brother Alyosha, who was training to be a monk, he's a pious and good man, an innocent, he retains his innocence and his goodness throughout the novel, goes to visit him. Mitya is extremely emotionally dysregulated. He's a sort of a manic depressive and he cannot regulate his own passions. So he goes into these frenzies, he goes into these rants. And when he is stimulated intellectually, his state worsens. There is a person who comes to visit him called Ratikin, and he hates this guy, but he's an intellectual. And so he hates the man, but he loves the discourse. At one point in the conversation between Mitya, who's about to go on trial, and Alyosha, his younger brother, he says, "I used to kick such people out, but now I listen to them. He talks a lot of sense too. Writes well. He began reading me an article last week. I copied out 3 lines of it. Wait a minute, here it is. And Nietzsche pulls out this rapidly written few lines that he's just pulled out of the air. It's like pre-memes, it's pre the internet, it's pre-Instagram posts where you just get a little slice of an intellectual idea. Nietzsche hurriedly pulled out a piece of paper from his pocket and read, "In order to determine this question, it is above all essential to put one's personality in contradiction to one's reality." Do you understand that? Nietzsche asking Alyosha. No, I don't, said Alyosha. He looked at Nietzsche and listened to him with curiosity. I don't understand it either. It's dark and obscure, but intellectual. Everyone writes like that now, he says. It's the effect of their environment. They are afraid of the environment. With Dostoevsky, there is a great subtlety, and I believe that there is an extremely subtle satirization going on here. I think it's clear that he's satirizing, this is 1883, this was written in, the new generation of philosophers, and particularly socialists. If you go online and you put in, did Dostoevsky hate socialists? You'll get tons of results and tons of forum posts and tons of articles. In my humble opinion, and this is not my area of expertise, but just reading the man's work, I don't really think it was socialism that he had a problem with. I think it was atheism. I think he was very, very troubled and very, very concerned by the godlessness of socialism. Not the idea that people were trying to be kind or trying to bring, more social justice into the world, just that it was a misapprehension. And as Dostoevsky wrote, not in the Brothers Karamazov, but in a letter, it's fundamentally materialistic. It's extremely money focused while pretending not to be, while pretending to hold money in contempt and that it's risen above the concept of capitalism and of material wealth. It's completely obsessed with money. It's totally materialistic. I think this is Dostoevsky's doubt. I think this is Dostoevsky's question. And one of the themes that recurs in the book is being too clever. There's a problem in being too clever. There's a problem in creating these incredibly intellectual, dark, materialistic and atheistic narratives. They burn away naivety. They burn away mystery. They burn away goodness, and they make a person cynical. He doesn't say that. He implies it. I think at parts in the book, he's actually particularly satirizing Karl Marx, because it's clever, clever, clever. It's very intellectual. It's quite hard to read Marx at times to figure out what it is that he's pointing to. You compare Dostoevsky or Tolstoy in the style of writing, it's extremely simple. They will just tell you a story. They'll tell you what they're talking about in simple language without the sentence pointing back to itself here, there, and you've got to have, it should be at least 15 paragraphs, but they shove it all into one sentence. Yes, yes, people will say in the comments, that was the style of the time. Okay, but why? Why was that the style? And why do we just write it off? Oh, that was just the style of the time. Why was it the style? It's extremely narcissistic. It's extremely poserish. It's very insincere, and it's clever, clever. And I think one of the warnings that is very subtly infused into the narrative in the Brothers Karamazov is a warning about being really clever, really ironic, really cynical, really atheistic, and really narcissistic. Because Nietzsche then wrote, God is dead, and we have killed him. Nietzsche's question was, well, what's going to replace him? And I think he had the same thought as Dostoevsky. When you remove God and when you remove heaven, the only thing that can replace God is you, is the self. So what's more narcissistic than that? You're now God. And if there's no heaven, well, then there's only earth, and there's only the material world, and there's only as much time as you have here on earth. So of course you're going to become frantic and hysterical and upset and attached to the things of this world, because now you believe that you are God, but you're the weak God of a permanently dying world with a very short lifespan and not enough stuff to go around. How does this influence my perception of TikTok? Every TikTok video is infused with insincere, poserish cleverness. And when you get through the Brothers Karamazov, and it is a getting through, it's a long book, and there's a lot to digest there. I personally found that by the end of it, I couldn't tolerate the insincerity. I couldn't tolerate the blatant grandstanding. I couldn't tolerate what is essentially just raw, vulgar, coarse narcissism. This is what happens when we lose God. This is what happens when we lose mystery. I'm not a particularly pious man myself. I'm not a religious man myself. But I can't argue with Dostoevsky and Nietzsche's position. I wouldn't even try. And I wouldn't argue philosophically. I would adopt the position psychologically that they've given us a model that is functional. If no God at top, let's make it so simple. If no God at top of everything, then self at top of everything. How do we argue with that? If there is no God at the top of everything and no heaven beyond this world, then my equation would read, then self at the top of everything, and this world is all there is, and therefore the material world becomes incredibly important, and everyone will be rendered greedy, grabby, single-minded, lustful, and, as Dostoevsky says, he cannot distinguish the truth within him or around him, and so he loses all respect for himself and others. Aren't we living through that time where we've lost respect for ourselves? We have no self-respect, so we don't defend ourselves, and we've lost respect for others. And having no respect, he ceases to love. Do we not live in, if not a loveless world, a love deficit world? There ain't that much love around. It's not commonly felt. It's definitely a love deficit world. In order to occupy and distract himself without love, he gives way to passions and coarse pleasures and sinks to bestiality. Of course, if there's no God, and this world is all there is, why wouldn't you give way to passions and coarse pleasures and sink to bestiality? There's nothing to stop you. So, Dostoevsky and a bit of Nietzsche put me off TikTok for life. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your time and your attention on that one. I hope you enjoyed it, and I look forward to speaking to you again soon. Cheers.